Hi, everyone, and welcome to the September NHWC webinar. This webinar will be recorded and placed on our YouTube channel. And during the webinar, if you have questions, please use the chat and question function. So I'm new to NHWC. I'm Matthew Riddlebarger, and I'll be helping facilitate this monthly webinar series. And before we get started, I have one announcement I'd like to make. Okay, so the Texas workshop has been postponed to February 9th and 10th of 2022. If you were previously registered, your registration has been carried forward, and we're working to get the website updated as soon as possible. For questions, please contact workshop@hydrologicwarning.org. Also, one other note real quick. So we are still putting together certificates for the professional development hours for a few of the past webinars. But yeah, we're putting those together and we should be sending those out in the coming weeks. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. We have Austin Doucet and Brooke Newlin from Fenstermaker, and they will be presenting to us about post-disaster data collection and evaluation. So with that, I will pass it off to Austin.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Much appreciated. Can you see my screen and hear me well?
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks. Again, my name is Austin Doucet, and I'm an engineer intern with Fenstermaker, and presenting alongside Brooke Newlin, an engineer intern and certified floodplain manager at Fenstermaker. We were presenting on Fenstermaker's post-disaster data collection and evaluation in coastal Louisiana. I will be discussing Cameron Parish aerial damage assessment, the Calcasieu Parish critical infrastructure damage assessment, street sign inventory, and channel debris removal due to Hurricane Laura. Brooke will then hit on real-time damage assessments and estimates completed for Calcasieu Parish due to the May 2021 flood. And then we'll conclude with damage assessments completed for St. John the Baptist due to post-Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Laura was one of the most powerful storms to hit Louisiana at a Category 4 with 150-mile-an-hour winds. It covered the wide area from Houston, Texas to New Orleans, Louisiana, and it made landfall early morning of August 27th in Cameron Parish. The eye wall then went down the center of Calcasieu Parish through the city of Lake Charles. Over 900,000 people were documented for power loss, just to put in perspective the wind damage that this area was prone to. Immediately, meaning the next day after Hurricane Laura passed through the southwest region, Louisiana, we started work for Cameron and Calcasieu Parish for disaster relief. Cameron Parish contracted Fenstermaker to complete an aerial damage assessment right after the hurricane concluded to be able to provide updates to the residents and parish officials without them traveling to see for themselves. They did not want them rushing back and putting their lives in jeopardy, so we were to provide updates for the parish and parish officials. What you see here is an ArcGIS dashboard. This was made public for everyone to view, including yourself. This software is pulling data from the field real time as our crews are out there gathering data. It shows aerial video, road closures when they're open or closed, and infrastructure damage. We utilize ArcGIS Survey 123 and Collector to gather this data. Before we get too far in the presentation, I want to introduce Survey 123 and Collector to you, as Fenstermaker utilizes this platform on majority of the assessments. Survey 123 can be downloaded on any device and is utilized in the field. Here's an example of a survey created here. You can see you can create a survey with multiple choice selections, yes or no, And whenever you select different questions, certain answers may appear for that one. You can also include imagery, any comments, as well as who collected it and the date. All this is developed and coded in the office before the field crews even come out. Collector can also be downloaded on any device and is utilized in the field as well. And here's an example of a map shown on the screen. In the office, you create a map, you can put your points of interest, as you can see the little gold stars or red dots. And in the field, you have this on your phone, tablet, or laptop. And actually, whenever you're in the field, you see a blue dot and an arrow traveling down, say, Roof Street here, if you're in the field. I'm doing this from the office, so obviously I'm not in the fields, and that's why the blue arrow does not pop up. And back to the dashboard, again, I just wanted to show you guys what Survey 123 and Collector consist of, because it will be mentioned many times throughout this presentation. All data collected using those two apps, just demonstrated, is shown here real time. Anyone in the office or at their home, on their tablet, phone even, can zoom in and click in any location. For instance, clicked here, it's an aerial video, and again, aerial video pops up. They're flying here, you're able to see any area that they flew around here. Now, again, this is for anybody that's, say, evacuated. This is for the parish officials to be able to view this without them putting themselves in danger on any flooded roadways or non-structural sound buildings. We also provided a link here at the bottom left corner within the dashboard to the public to submit individual images and videos. Public submissions had to be reviewed by Fenstermaker before being put on the dashboard, and if people's faces or were shown in the photo or any inappropriate images, they were not posted online. So Fenstermaker did go through these photos first, but here is a snippet again of a simple Survey 123 utilized. It pulls the exact location that you are standing at. It's geo-referenced with your phone if you share your location, and you can just put simple photos, landscape, portrait, however you take it in the field, and it will pop up real time into our data collection set. Lastly, before I end on here, I just want to state that this dashboard made it pretty popular, and even Washington, D.C., FEMA ended up utilizing this for damage assessments. Similarly to Cameron Parish, Calhoun Parish contracted to complete an aerial damage assessment right after Hurricane Laura of all critical structure within the parish. Shown again here is a dashboard created with all aerial video, aerial images, as well as ground level shots. The critical infrastructure within the parish includes schools, hospitals, fire, police departments, water and wastewater plants, lift stations, as well as parish buildings. Again, to gather this data and to put it on an ArcGIS dashboard in the office and provide parish updates real time, we utilize ArcGIS Survey 123 and Collector again. Similar to the last dashboard, once you find a point of interest, anyone can zoom in and click on whatever your point of interest is and view any drone video, images, or ground level shots. The parish was able to utilize this data for updates on their critical infrastructure, as well as preparation for grant funding if buildings were damaged within the parish, as they are critical infrastructure. Calhoun Parish also contracted us to complete a traffic sign inventory and replacement of signs within the parish. This is important when it comes to safety, as well as limiting liability after a natural disaster, especially as there are many unfamiliar workers within this area there for debris, for trucks, for generators, anything electrical. There are many unfamiliar people within this area, so it tends to actually cause more crashes, and so signs need to get up as soon as possible. Take you on a little tour through Calhoun Parish sign. Calhoun Parish has roughly 25,000 signs within the parish that they're responsible of. All of these signs are tracked in Cartograph, which is what the parish utilizes to track their assets, such as traffic signs. It's a total separate program that they utilize. These signs were exported out of Cartograph and given to Fenstermaker us as one large shapefile. It was then agreed upon that we will be contracted to provide inventory on roughly 11,000 of the 25,000 signs, which includes only stop signs, yield signs, and the warning signs throughout the parish. This does not include say a school bus sign, school speed zone signs, and such signs like that. Now that we've appeared at roughly 11,000 signs, we needed to prioritize what signs come first, meaning what signs and what locations are even more urgent than others. They're obviously all urgent, but we needed to really nail down what was first. We broke down the signs up into 3 priorities, with that being 1A, 1B, and 2. 1A included the stop, yield, and warning signs along all major roadways. Calcasieu Parish has a master plan of roadways, so we were able to identify from their master plan of what roads were actually major, and we prioritized those in 1A. 1B was the remaining of the stop and yield signs in the parish. For instance, a lot of these are actually in local developments, on local streets, not necessarily the main highways within the parish. And finally, priority 2 was the remaining of all other warning signs in the parish. And again, warning signs are such as chevron alignments, turn left, curve right, to that really notify you what's coming up in advisory speed flags. Again, shown here is a dashboard of the priority 2 signs that are being inventoried. Just for an example, we deployed roughly 10 to 14 crews to quickly gather inventory as soon as the hurricane passed, again, utilizing Survey 123 and Collector. So all these red dots represent, these were on the dashboard, and they show on Collector of our crews, again, sending 10 to 14 crews out. They are able to see, I need to travel to this red dot in Collector, and I'm going to utilize Survey 123 to fill out a direct survey, and this will go real time back to the office for review. The inventory of the signs, again, would come in the dashboard real time, and that's why you see purple dots. On the right end, I just put this here, you were able to track the progress, and this was shared with the parish as well as Fenstermaker or any subs on the project, and you're able to see the progress as we visit the signs. Once the signs were reviewed in the office, a list of all signs, posts, and anchors needed to be replaced was produced. And those signs were exported out, made a list, as well as shown on a dashboard for now a contractor, a newly hired contractor, could view what signs needed to be replaced. And they also utilized ArcGIS Collector to view what signs need to be replaced, and it had a certain color to it, whatever it may be at the time, and it told them stop sign needs to be replaced, post is good, anchor's good, plaque needs to be replaced, and so on. Once the contractor installed the new signage, a Fenstermaker inspector utilized the Survey 123 app again to verify everything was done according to specification. And that's what these gold dots here, or represent the signage that has been replaced and is acceptable. So therefore, the parish was able to look at the dashboard and see progress of what has been replaced for, say, funding, or when are we going to complete this project, so they're able to notify any citizens or any public officials. As you see, we still have some red dots remaining, and this is due to Hurricane Delta hitting roughly a month after Laura. And I want to bring that up just because with keeping up with this process of ArcGIS Online products, it was very easy to differentiate what damage was done from Delta and what was from Laura. And that became important when dealing with federal funding and reimbursement of what hurricane, what natural disaster did the replacement of this sign and this money and this time go to. Most important thing, at the end of the construction phase and the contract completed all work from Hurricane Laura, we were able to export all data gathered for roughly 11,000 signs and get it to the parish to import directly back into their asset system alone called Cartograph. Lastly, we served as a sub-consultant to Hunt Gilliatt and Associates, also known as HGA, to assist the parish with channel debris removal. As the parish has roughly 1,700 miles of channel to maintain within the parish, with some draining more areas than the other, we were tasked with prioritizing what is to be cleaned first within each drainage basin in the parish. First, the parish updated their lateral naming convention to make the process go smoothly. Utilizing the naming convention, which helped on what everything is called, and the parish ordinances, we identified the channels to these 4 categories, such as main lateral, primary, secondary, and tertiary channel. Each level was further broken down based on number of repetitive losses and number of structures drained into that reach. This was done for roughly 80 basins in the parish, so once permits are received, within each basin, the contractor will have a plan to follow. This is important because if you look at this map here and you see all the channels, certain permits are going to get approved at certain times, as well as does a contractor start upstream, do they start downstream, do they start in the middle, are they starting at a roadway, or are they starting where it really matters? And so that was important when prioritizing how these channels should be cleaned to not impact the system even more. This effort has not been kicked off yet, but this is the dashboard that is planned to go live for public officials to view. All channels will be cleaned and colors will change from green to whatever the color is chosen. Roughly 1,700 debris piles have been identified, and roughly 18 million square footage of debris is to be removed. This debris has not been removed due to the permitting, which led to maybe possibly even more impact for Calcasieu Parish during the May 17, 2021 flood event. And now I will let Brooke touch further on the impacts of that flood and bring you through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm not going to share my webcam just because we're having some technical difficulties over here, but and here's my technical difficulties. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, can y'all see my screen now?
Yeah, I see May 2021 flood.
Okay, great. So like also said, thanks Austin. My name is Brooke Newlin with Fenstermaker, and I'll be talking about 2 more recent disasters that Louisiana experienced that we assisted with post-disaster recovery efforts. The 2 events that I'll be talking about is the May 2021 severe flooding as well as Hurricane Ida. I'm going to begin with the May 2021 flood. So this event was a thunderstorm that moved very slowly across Lake Charles on May 17, 2021. And the very intense rainfall that was not predicted occurred in the eastern portion of the parish. And this produced widespread localized flooding, and many streets were flooded and impassable. There were numerous vehicles that were flooded as well, and some were even swept into the roadside ditches and bayous. Numerous homes and businesses were also flooded in South Lake Charles, as well as some schools and churches. I just want to mention that this event caused localized flooding in areas that had never even flooded before. So this was definitely an extraordinary event that was not expected. So as you can tell in the radar loop from the previous slide, the eastern portion of Calcasieu Parish received the heaviest rainfall totals. This map shows the 72-hour rain accumulation on the eastern side, and you could see that the heaviest rainfall fell in Lake Charles and the surrounding areas, with about 15 inches that was recorded. The important thing to note about this, since it's a 72-hour rain accumulation, the amount of rainfall that fell in just a 12-hour period is really what caused this and was the reason that this was such a widespread flooding event. While that's a 72-hour rain accumulation map, you can tell from one of the gauges in Lake Charles that the bulk of the rain fell in just less than 24 hours on May 17th, 2021. Now we're going to zoom into one of the hardest hit locations to see a series of photos that was captured by a resident. And I just want to note that this was just over a 45-minute period. And so it's very eye-opening that this occurred in this short amount of time. So you could see that this vehicle in just 45 minutes was completely inundated from the bumper all the way to the top. This is an extreme amount of rainfall that is hard to prepare for, even in the best cases. So whenever the parish realized that they were in the midst of a disaster and they had a disaster on their hands, they contacted Fenstermaker to help them get an understanding of the amount of damaged structures that they could expect as a result of this storm. And there were about, I think, 5 fatalities that were linked to this storm. It included, I think, 4 vehicle floods that were washed away and caused that person to perish, as well as loss of power, and that turned into loss of oxygen for a critical patient. So how we were able to do this was the parish, Calcasieu Parish, has set up an extensive gauging network that includes over 115 rain gauges and plus about 40 gauges that are maintained by either USGS and NOAA. This network of gauges is considered one of the most extensive in Louisiana. So this is not something that's prevalent in other areas. And the fact that the parish had this in place was one of the reasons that they could produce hyper accurate initial damage estimates like we did. So the parish's gauges collect both rainfall and stage data, and that was utilized to produce a map, a contour map pretty much of the water surface elevations that were recorded by the parish's gauging network. And so you can see here that the blue stars are the gauge locations, and based on the water surface elevations that were recorded at each gauge, we were able to produce a contour map that could then be overlaid with the parish's high resolution LiDAR that was collected in 2017 to get a water depth map that extended across the hardest impacted areas during this event. And so once we were able to get the depth of water across the impacted areas, we compared that to the parish's structured data set, which includes all the residential, commercial, and commercial structures throughout the parish. And so what we were able to do, utilizing that structured data set, as well as the depth of water extents that we created based on the contour map, we were able to identify the number of potentially flooded structures as a result of this storm. I'm gonna zoom into one area that was really hard hit and show y'all the map of what we created. And so the table on the left side of the screen is broken down into likely flooded properties and possibly flooded properties. And so if a structure fell within an area that had a depth of water between 1/2 foot and 1 foot, then that structure was identified as possibly being flooded. And those structures are shown in yellow on this map. if a structure fell within an area that had a depth of water greater than a foot, then those structures were identified as likely flooded. And so you can see those structures in red. And this is just one location. This map just shows one location of one of the hardest hit areas. This was done for 5 other areas in the eastern portion of the parish. So we were able to determine that approximately almost 4,000 structures could be assumed to be damaged as a result of this storm. One thing I want to mention is how hyper accurate this data was and can be considered. A few weeks after the severe storms and the flooding event occurred, FEMA released the number of flood insurance claims that had been submitted as a result of the spring 2021 flood events. And this total number was around 3,200 at the time. And that was as of the 8th of June. And so you can notice how close Fenstermaker's estimate was to this. And while it may seem a little off, there are a few things that should be noted as to what captured our estimate. One of these includes the fact that the number of claims reported to FEMA did not include any structures that were not insured at the time of the flood event. And knowing that this event produced flooding, localized flooding in areas that had never seen flooding before, that plays a role into this higher number. And so we can expect that the parish can expect a more close to the 4,000 likely flooded structures throughout the parish as a result of this flooding event. And so this hyperactive estimate by Fenstermaker not only allowed the parish to focus on critical emergency management at the time of the flood, but it also allowed them and set them up for greater funding potential from FEMA, as it was one less thing that they had to worry about on their plate. And so this can play into a presidential declaration of a disaster. And so normally how those are identified is if there's a pending hurricane coming towards the coast, then they'll identify that as a presidentially declared disaster beforehand, which allows recovery and emergency resources to be issued at that time. So it's in place at the time the emergency is occurring. But since this was a event that was not planned and was not known to happen, the presidential declaration occurred a few weeks after. And when this occurs, sometimes the estimates, the damage estimates that are produced by the local governments to the state and federal governments can play a role in the event being classified as a presidentially declared disaster. And so it is very likely that this is kind of what occurred for this event, since this was not a planned event and this was a hyper-accurate estimate by Fenstermaker. And so I just wanted to also note that the number of claims reported as a result of this spring severe storms is almost comparable to the number of claims that were reported by Laura, Delta, and Zeta combined, which was about a little over 3,600. And so that just kind of puts it into perspective how significant and impactful that this flood event was. And so in addition to the initial damage estimates that we worked on for the parish, we also assisted with post-disaster damage estimates. And we had crews out there that day collecting aerial imagery and videos to document the widespread impact of the flooding that occurred in the Lake Charles and surrounding areas. this is just one of the drone videos that occurred and or that were captured and shows the widespread impact of flooded structures, as well as you know, the widespread impact that occurred in this area. One thing I do want to note is we had to get our crews out there very quickly to be able to document the water before it began receding, and that occurred fairly quickly with this event, since it was a localized flooding event. And so since we were able to get our crews out there quick and capture this imagery in this videos, that provides a good documentation to the parish to assist with potential funding in the future for recovery from this disaster. Another thing that we were able to do to assist the parish after this disaster was the days following the event on the 17th, we had survey crews go out to critical infrastructure locations, and they were documenting high water marks where they could find them. And they went to critical infrastructure locations such as schools, hospitals, emergency facilities, parish buildings, lift stations, and wastewater treatment plants, and other water towers, things like that. They were able to document the high water marks that they could find, and our survey crews are proficient and trained to recognize the high water marks that some people may not be familiar with or be able to recognize. And so this is one example where an accessory building received flooding and was flooded, and the depth of water was identified on the building as kind of a debris line of dirt. And while it may not be that visible, our crews are trained to be able to recognize this and be able to document this. And so they were able to find things like this, identifications along these buildings and facilities, to be able to capture the depth of water that was experienced at each facility. And so this documentation sets the parish up for better planning in the future, as well as getting recovery funds from FEMA to assist in recovery. And so we did something similar to that after Hurricane Ida in St. John the Baptist Parish, which was one of the hardest hit areas when it comes to flooding after Hurricane Ida. And so a little background on Hurricane Ida. It recently occurred on August 29th, exactly 16 years to the date of Hurricane Katrina's landfall, and almost hit in the same exact location as well. Hurricane Ida made landfall in Port Fourchon as a powerful Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at landfall of about 150 miles per hour. This tied Ida with Hurricane Laura in 2020, as well as the 1856 Last Island hurricane, as the strongest hurricane on record in the state of Louisiana. So this was a very strong event. And so St. John the Baptist Parish is located just south of Lake Pontchartrain, which is shown here, and it's located along the rim in between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. So this is a zoomed in photo of the parish, and it shows the three major municipalities in the parish. And so thankfully the New Orleans levee system withstood the Hurricane Ida's brute force to where there was limited flooding inland compared to Hurricane Katrina. There was one location, although, along the southwestern rim of Lake Pontchartrain, where a levee was overtopped and many of the structures in the surrounding area were flooded. And this occurred in Laplace. And so Fenstermaker assisted the parish in assessing the widespread impact of flooding, as well as documenting high water marks where critical infrastructure facilities were located. So to be able to do this, we had to get crews out there as soon as possible before the water receded and while it was still at its highest point. And so we were able to get 2 crews out there the day after Ida made landfall, which it made landfall on the 29th, so we were out there on the 30th. And then we had 2 more crews the following day join those 2 crews. And so for a total of 4 crews, we were out there, I think, 3 days collecting aerial footage, as well as documenting and identifying high water marks on critical facilities and other objects that it could be found on. And so this is just one aerial image of the widespread flooding that occurred as a result of the levee being overtopped in Laplace. And so Fenstermaker crews were assessing both on the ground as well as aerially the critical infrastructure facilities, but they also focused on surrounding areas as well that were flooded, like neighborhoods and other developed areas. And so they mainly focused on hospitals, parish buildings, and other important structures such as churches and community centers. And because the survey crews were able to use the Survey 123 and Collector apps, this allowed the images and videos that they were taking in real time to be updated and posted on an ArcGIS dashboard like the one shown here. And so this allowed the parish officials to be able to access the footage in real time as it was being collected, which was critical with the amount of flooding that had occurred in this area and the limited amount of access they had back into the area. So, like I said, our crews were either on the ground identifying high water marks, or they were flying drones to get aerial imagery of the widespread flooding. And so this is one location where they were on foot and they found a high water mark on a tree. And so they focused on street signs, street lights, critical facilities, and other objects that they could see high water marks on. But this is just one example. So what they did was, whenever they could find and locate a high water mark identification, they placed a nail on the object where the high water mark was determined to be. And so this allowed the high water mark to be identified, and at a later date, a survey crew could go back and survey the elevation of the high water mark, which then could be used to assist in recovery efforts. And so this is just one example of a nail in a tree. And so once the crews got to a point where they can no longer access the the roads because it was flooded, then they took out the drone equipment and they took aerial images of the widespread impact. And so whenever they were able to do this, they tried to get approximate depths of water on any critical infrastructure buildings, but they were also able to fly the surrounding areas to not only document the impact to critical infrastructure facilities, but also the surrounding neighborhoods. So this is critical information that the parish can use to submit to FEMA for funding for recovery and future uses. And so these images show just one area in Laplace that was right off of Interstate 10, where the on-ramps and pretty much the access off of I-10 was restricted because the roadways were inundated. And so this allowed parish officials to be able to see the extent and the widespread impact of the flooding without having to get back into the area and see it for themselves. And so this was very, very useful to the parish, being the state that they were in at the time, and the quickness of the data that we were able to collect and produce to them. And so that concludes our presentation. We appreciate you for listening, and my contact information as well as Austin's is provided here. If anyone wanted to ask any questions after the webinar, y'all can contact us. But we are now open to questions at this time.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you, Brooke, for the presentations. Yeah, so feel free to type any questions you guys might have, and I'll read them out, and yeah, Austin or Brooke will answer this for you. Okay, I see one question here. They say, how long were staff in the field for these efforts?
So for Hurricane Ida, I think the critical infrastructure crews were out there for 4 days after collecting data. And so that pretty much, that was based on how fast the water receded as well. And so the water began receding on the 3rd day. And so at that point, it was, I think it was maybe a few days that they were out there. So maybe like a total of 4 or 5. As for the May 2021 flood, we were out there because it was such a centrally located event on a single day. Our crews were out there our drone crews were out there for 2 days following the event on the 18th and the 19th. And then our survey crews were out there for 4 days following the event to collect the high water marks on critical infrastructure facilities.
Yeah, and just to hit on that as well, Matt, all the projects that I presented are obviously different timing, as the signs took, several months to get through, as it was several locations where the critical infrastructure could be done within the first week after the hurricane or so on. But the key thing to note is utilizing the drone, the aerial video and imagery, as well as the applications I mentioned in Survey 1, 2, 3 and Collector. It really sped up time, whether if you go back in time and did this, via paper and just by your cell phone itself, we were able to get to locations that we wouldn't be able to get to and provide more information very quickly. So.
Okay, we have another question. They ask, it's Nick Castile asks, are there any tools or technologies that would have allowed for more rapid or accessible data collection more immediately following an event?
But besides the two, that's a good question, and stuff is evolving as we speak. But the two we utilize, in 2020 and even early 2021 this year, was Survey 1, 2, 3 and Collector, and they actually ArcGIS platform just came out with field maps. That's something, if you're interested in, definitely do your research on. Is field maps kind of collects those two things together, and you're able to go in the field and kind of use one application to fill out both, where you don't even have to have two applications on your phone and view one and fill out another. Field maps will speed up things and help with any service loss technology things dealing with just one app. So I think that's definitely one to key up on. And also, there's a couple other things to where if you take imagery, we obviously went to the field, boots on the ground for some of these, but also we could have videoed fully, and there's something called full motion video that you're able to look at in ArcGIS as well, and you can actually bring your drone footage back in the office, and somebody can review in the office and be able to click on dots and fill out data. So that's another one worth mentioning, is some great technology to get through these things. Hope that answers your question.
We have another question from Rafael Rodriguez. They ask, for the drone flights, did the crew capture a geo-referenced orthomosaic or just a single imagery / videos?
Yes, I would like to give my drone crew directly, but I believe it's just imagery. I know there were some times to where we did a full mosaic, or another company provided a mosaic full throughout her. I think somebody was contracted that elsewhere to do that for Calcasieu Parish after, but the ones we showed today were actually just imagery. So a short answer, but.
Okay. From Jeff Brizendine, he asks, were there any major hurdles that needed to be overcome?
I'm sure Brooke can speak on a couple. I'll speak on, one first is obviously when these post-disaster, these natural disasters occur, and going to these locations such as we talked a lot about Calcasieu Parish and St. Cameron Parish and even St. John the Baptist, is you don't put in perspective of once you get in there, you can't get gas anymore. You don't have food. You don't have water. You don't have running water. You don't have anywhere unless you have a generator to charge, say, any drone, any phone. So that's an eye-opening thing from day one that we saw. We thought it was going to be this, but it was even more. So that got us prepared very quickly within the last 2 years of this post-disaster. And so that's one. I think that's the key thing. And obviously, I mentioned safety with the traffic stuff. You have a lot of unfamiliar people with the parish and whatever municipality you're in. And if there's not a stop sign or traffic lights off, it gets really dangerous. And it's definitely these guys in the big trucks removing trees. They're not really worried about you and your little company passenger car. So that's two main things. And last, I'll hit on the signs. Dealing with 11,000 signs and dealing with different personnel, phone service. In say Calcasieu Parish, there is certain cities that have not the best service, where their AT&T's down or Verizon's down, and so that was definitely a hurdle where we had to quickly adapt with be able to store this information while we're in the field within the app, and whenever they get service within say a bigger little town in Calcasieu Parish, they were able to send all that data forward. So I'll hit on those. Brooke, I don't know if you have any.
I think that pretty much covers it on my end.
Okay. Question from Dan Field for Austin. They ask, you mentioned the public could send in photos / videos and then they'd be reviewed by personnel to add to overall data collection. How quickly during / after the storm event was public submitted data reviewed? Was it reviewed during the storm event, near real time, days or weeks after the storm event?
So yeah, obviously they were hoping as least amount of people would go to Cameron Parish post storm. That's why they wanted just officials and ourselves to get this data for them. But as people in public were submitting, we actually had a person or two sometimes in the office waiting for that data to quickly review and instantly. You can almost say it's real time, even with a little lag of review, to put those on the dashboard that the public can see. So closest thing to real time as it gets, because it hits our system real time, literally instantly. Once they submit, it does pop up on ours, and we will review that. Just quick check, it's only an image or two or a video or two, and instantly put that to where the public can see as well. So
okay, thanks. Another question here from Tanner Mills. They ask, did Calcasieu Parish's gauging system change your approach on damage assessment?
Brooke, I think you can speak on that one pretty well.
Yeah, so it did that. It allowed us to, while the event was occurring, to be able to produce the data that we did. If we didn't have the large network and the data that we had gotten from their gauging system, then you would rely on the post-disaster data collection, like the high water marks and things like that, and flood depths that we got, to be able to get an accurate, a semi-accurate estimate of damaged structures, which prohibits, so 48 hours after a disaster occurs, the initial damage estimates have to be submitted to GOSEP. And so without the parish's gauging network, the hyper accurate data that we were able to determine and produce would not have been, we wouldn't have been able to do that without the gauging network. So it was definitely a good investment on the parish's part, for setting up that gauging network.
Brooke, a moment ago, you mentioned that within 48 hours, initial damage reports have to be sent to some type of acronym, and I didn't catch what that was. Could you mention that again?
So GOSEP, that's the governor's office of
Maybe emergency preparedness? I don't know.
Yes, that sounds. It's slipping my mind at this point, but it's to the state, to the governor's office.
Okay, cool. I haven't seen any questions come in the past few minutes, so unless I see another one come up here in the next few, I don't know, 30 seconds or so, then we'll be wrapping up the webinar. Again, thank you, Austin, and thank you, Brooke, for your presentation today. It was really good.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for the invite and allowed us to do this. It was enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be posting this, the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel in the next few weeks. So with that, I think that wraps it up. Thank you guys again, and everybody have a great day.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.